So this is my first book review here. Hopefully there'll be more of them. I also like to do some film reviews. I had plans to give you a Last Jedi review with a green screen and everything, but I found that I couldn't get the lighting for the green screen, and since I'm heading to China in a couple of weeks, I couldn't see myself trying to get that rig together before leaving. When I get to China, I'll try and get that rigged up and do that for it. This book review is going to be about this book here, The China Mirage by James Bradley. Just completed it. Interesting fact about the author, James Bradley. He's the son of the gentleman who took the famous Iwo Jima photo of soldiers raising the American flag on Iwo Jima. So you certainly gain some insight from him as being that gentleman's son. Now the book itself, it starts out and gives a good sort of detail, and there's plenty of research, and he does a good job in writing about the Roosevelts, and he does a great job in sort of establishing that a lot of American wealth and a lot of the American institutions were built on the opium trade with China. And that's kind of sort of sets the grounds for a lot of American familiarity with China. Then he kind of goes into the China lobby and a man named TV Soong, or Charlie Soong, and how he was kind of the main representative of China in the United States as we were led into World War II. Now he does a great deal of writing about the China lobby, and this is an organization that was really effective in sort of shaping American perceptions of China. And you can see it in the works of writers like Pearl Buck, probably the most well-known author during that period, writing about China, and how they wanted to shape American ideas about China, that it would be a great Christian American nation. And it also, goes into great, it also, reveals how the American public was being carefully misled and basically scammed by the Soongs and by Chiang Kai-shek, the leader that we endorsed during World War II and during China's revolution. And what a grave mistake that was, how detrimental that has been in Americans' understanding of China and perception of China. I would say the writer has definitely that sort of prerequisite liberal idealism that is associated with the Democratic Party here, because he's rather reluctant to be, he's actually rather, he still sort of keeps sort of a flattering sort of perspective towards FDR, even though FDR is sort of policies of appeasement of Japan, and his reluctance to engage in oil embargo kind of led us into that war, when really he probably should have just engaged that war a lot sooner, and the casualties wouldn't have been as devastating as they were. But once again, this was all tied into our relations with China at that time, because Japan had invaded China and needed the resources. At the same time, China was a greater ally for the United States in terms of potential. The problem was that we were misled. We kind of had Charlie Soong and Mei Ling and Eileen Soong, the Soong sisters. They kind of led the American public on this great sort of fantasy, fantasy narrative on how they were changing China. And really, the person who was changing China, and the book does a good deal of sort of describing and sort of representing Mao Zedong during this time, was Mao Zedong, but we did not, for fear of the word communism, we couldn't sort of recognize that he was leading a revolution that was very akin to our own. And our inability to recognize that led to other the book kind of demonstrates or suggests that that same sort of inability to grasp the truth or an accurate perception of what was going on in China led also to Vietnam and the Korean Wars. And I believe that. I certainly, from what I've read about Mao Zedong, he certainly was. He came from the people, you know, and he was actually sort of believed in that China that was based in the people. Of course, you know, you have to read on. The book doesn't really sort of follow through and follow through on Mao Zedong during the Cultural Revolution, what happens there. So if you really want a full perspective of Mao Zedong, you of course have to look into those episodes of history also. But certainly I would agree that Mao Zedong was the better man to lead China than Chiang Kai-shek. And it's great. The book does a great job of sort of introducing people who are unfamiliar with people like John Service and Joseph Stilwell, General Stilwell, who were people who were, who were men who saw through the scam and went to China and went and met Mao Zedong. And the book even suggests that had we listened to those men instead of firing them or marginalizing them, which happened with Joseph McCarthy came into power, perhaps our relations with China and even North Korea now would not be so severe or so full of conflict. We would find ourselves on the same page, as was really their intentions. You know, it was always my understanding that these revolutions, you know, took a great deal of their inspiration and their language and their idealism from the American Revolution. So it just seems a terrible case of willful neglect not to recognize that. And here we are in the 20th century still feeling the effects of that neglect. You know, that these certain people, these certain authority figures were not willing to sort of recognize themselves and other people's struggles and aspirations. So instead, we endorsed Chiang Kai-shek, who is in the book is written as somebody who is definitely sort of just a scam artist, scamming the American public, along with his pretty wives and their families, who had nothing but their own selfish intentions for China, rather than Mao Zedong, who saw a greater China that was built on the population's needs and hopes and aspirations. Another thing, I really wish that this kind of information was in our schools. You know, that our social studies were addressing this history, because I think it's essential to certainly the kids' future. There's that idea of karma, what comes around goes around, and that Christian belief of do unto others as you'll have done unto yourselves, and to some extent you see the Chinese in the position now to show that same sort of negligence, willful negligence towards America that we showed them, and it's hard not to discredit it. You know, if you actually are a Christian, you would see that it would follow suit with your belief system, or if you believe in checks and balances, it would also sort of equate with that. I guess that's about all I'm going to say about the book. I would suggest it. I highly recommend it. It's a great place to start, but there's holes to fill in that I think you should also do if you're interested in China. I spent the last 6 years in China teaching English. It's a great country. It's got a great culture. The people are every bit as intelligent and human as anybody else in the world, and you'll have your disagreements with them, and you'll have your agreements with them. But for the most part, they're peaceful people trying to live out their own lives in that peace. So I hope to go. I'm going back there this year, and I hope to spend as much time there again as I've spent previously. I hope to make another review for you. Like I said, when I get to China, I'll try and get some of my studio set up so I can give you some movie reviews and maybe some vlogs from there. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Check you out next time. Till then, take it easy and read a good book. Bye-bye.